Well, thanks very much, Jeff, and it's a great pleasure to be here and a great honour to be offered the opportunity to open today's sessions. I do recall, as a new member of the ACCC many years ago, my first job was to take the calls in our Brisbane office, and I was a very proud law graduate at the time, and I thought, well, now this is easy. I've just studied all of this, and only after a week I realised I had a heck of a lot to learn, and the real world isn't what you find in the law books. The real world is what people experience, and that's what we grapple with at the ACCC every day. That's what keeps me interested in getting out of bed every morning and doing the work that we do. So a lot of what I'll talk about quickly today is able to be explored in greater depth at a number of workshops that are happening around the country. And if there is interest in any of the topics that I touch on today, albeit quickly, we'll be quite comfortable in expanding or finding opportunities to expand on them with anyone who'd like to take them up with us at all. The common theme of my next sort of discussion really goes to standards of behaviour, norms of behaviour. We're about competition, but the competition and the fairness that is expected in the marketplace really relies on business and community norms of behaviour, just what's acceptable. And some of the issues that we've explored in our court cases and in other work over the last year or two just reminds us that some businesses, particularly at the big end of town sometimes, their sense of what's fair is out of touch with what people in the community, businesses, small businesses expect and the way they expect to be treated. And that's why we've got the job that we've got. So I'd just like to take this opportunity then to identify a few important new competition and consumer protection laws on the horizon that have potential to protect your interests, both growers and other small businesses in horticulture, and to remind you of some of the existing protections that you may be already familiar with. We are stepping up our communication with horticulture and agriculture sectors generally. We see that as part of our job to ensure that you get the benefit of the developments, the new protections being introduced and the benefit of the market economy. Today I'll highlight a few new laws, including the business-to-business unfair contract terms and developments in country of origin labelling. But we'll also make sure that along with other agricultural businesses, you are aware of some of the impacts we've secured using the older laws like misleading and deceptive conduct, unconscionable conduct, and collective bargaining. During the next few months, our new Commissioner for Agriculture, Mick Keogh, and our Deputy Chair, Michael Shaper, will be travelling around the country to explain these issues directly to growers and others in the horticultural sector. But as I speak, they're preparing to travel for the next series of workshops in Bunbury in Western Australia, followed by Griffith in New South Wales, Murray Bridge in South Australia, and then Devonport in Tasmania. They've recently heard from growers in Shepparton in Victoria and, of course, Toowoomba here in Queensland. Attendees at these workshops have the opportunity to learn about the role, the work that we do, and we have the opportunity to hear what the real issues are on the ground facing you that we need to be aware of. We, as an agency, are pretty keen to make sure we're tackling the big problems. We need to know what those big problems are. The ACCC has a number of functions, of course, that play a role in ensuring benefits of market economy to reach the regional Australia. This includes, as I've touched on, the collective bargaining work that we support, taking action against unconscionable conduct by big business, which I'll touch on shortly, and policing country of origin and other labelling claims. We also have a product safety role, which is one of the areas which is particularly in my bailiwick, as well as the info centre. So that touches on issues such as the warnings on vehicle jacks, the work we do on quad bikes, and a range of other issues on products that you'll be familiar with. We enforce water market rules under the Water Act. We also enable competitive access to telecommunications services, railways, gas pipelines. That enables some competition downstream so that there's better price and variety of services offered for those relying on those regimes. As you know, we are responsible for enforcing and promoting compliance with the Horticulture Code. That's been subject to review for some time. I'm not really in a position to go into a lot of depth given we're in caretaker mode on that. It's an area of policy, but changes forecast. And of course the Food and Grocery Code. And I'll show some links between the Food and Grocery Code and our unconscionable conduct as I go. Last year we received additional funding through the government's Agricultural Competitive White Paper to have an increased focus on agricultural markets. We've since established the Agriculture Unit, which is the first for our agency. And through the unit we're building our knowledge around the complexities of agricultural supply chains, and that'll inform our decision making and our analysis and hopefully enable us to be very much on the front foot as issues emerge. We are focusing on investigating potential breaches of the Act, where appropriate taking enforcement action, and increased engagement with the sector through the regional visits and the workshops, and advocacy on agricultural issues, including through the use of market studies. Market studies is a function we're developing more at the ACCC, where an issue emerges that's not on the face of it very straightforward, needs some thinking through, and so we're putting a little bit of effort there to make sure we can get to grips with what's going on. So taking it out of the agricultural sector just briefly, we had an issue where we were looking at door-to-door sales, for example, and what we found we're trying to understand why was it with door-to-door sales that the issues that seem to be problematic for consumers at home when they're faced by door-to-door salespeople and finding themselves getting signed up to contracts they didn't expect to be signed up to or agree to, trying to understand why that continued to happen, even though the energy companies, which at the time were the main users of door-to-door sales, were confident that this was a good model. And what we found after working through it with some care was that the contracting model within the marketing of energy services, the door-to-door marketing, relied on a distant chain of supply of the people who were doing the door knocking. It turned out that the people doing the door knocking were largely international students who had little knowledge of the law, and in a bit of irony, they were largely targeting new Australians in the community, elderly Australians, but new Australians as well. So you had people who didn't know much because they just arrived and they were consumers, and people who didn't know much who were doing the selling. And once we were able to understand that and to explain it, the energy companies decided that that wasn't a terrifically good model to continue. And so that was a bit of advocacy, didn't require a federal court case, but it did take the energy companies out of a business model that was problematic, and hence market studies. We've also established an agricultural consultative committee to ensure that we have good dialogue, and we have representatives from AusVeg, Voice of Horticulture and Citrus Australia, primary producers, South Australia and Freshmark, to name a few, in the horticulture sector. The committee is providing a forum for discussion of competition and fair trading concerns in the sector. On fair trading, as I've said, is about complying with the laws that govern interactions with other businesses and consumers and meeting sort of community and business expectations. The first and probably most widely known area of our work involves misleading and deceptive conduct. Businesses cannot behave in a misleading or deceptive way and cannot make false or misleading claims. And probably the best example I might draw on today was an action we took against the trader for false claims about a product branded Victoria Honey, just a small example really, where the product labelled Victoria Honey had not just a label, not just the name, but also the get-up on the labelling, gave a very distinct impression that the product was from Victoria, when in fact it was a product from Turkey. And so basically an opportunist coming into the market, trying to capitalise on sort of a profile of a particular region and make a premium for a product that didn't warrant it. And so they're the sort of issues that we're pretty concerned about. On country of origin labelling, you may be aware that there's a new country of origin labelling, food labelling regime that's about to commence on the 1st of July. There's a 2-year transition period, so it actually takes really sort of effect on 1st of July 2018. There's quite a lot of work that the ACCC is doing to develop guidance for anyone in the supply chain so that you're aware of, understand what's expected, and can get some guidance on how to go about meeting those expectations. So those guidance materials will be released very shortly. Many traders moving to business unfair contract terms. We at the ACCC were provided an opportunity to look at unfair contract terms in standard form consumer contracts some years ago. And we identified in telecommunications, airlines, and a few other hire car sectors that there were some pretty odd clauses in standard form contracts, and they're not limited to consumer contracts. They extend to business. We secured quite a lot of change in those standard form contracts that you and I rely on. Well, you may well rely on in your business dealings as well as your sort of consumer experience. In the business-to-business area that has now been extended to, we're currently sort of exploring a number of sectors where unfair terms on the face of it are used as well. So retail tenancy, contracting are a couple of the areas that we're looking at. We're very interested to hear if there are unfair contract terms that you face in your dealings. An example in the franchising area which always captured my imagination was one where a franchisee was required to sign a contract, and we're still sort of exploring this, but let me just say it's one that continues to capture my imagination. Franchisee required to sign a contract which agrees that in the event that the franchisee raises a dispute, then the franchisee will fund the franchisor's legal costs. And so straight away, as soon as there's a complaint, it goes straight to the external legal provider who then bills the franchisee. It's significant disincentive for raising a complaint. So just a small example. So the law will apply to at least where at least one business employs less than 20 people, and the price payable under the contract is no more than $300,000 in a 12-month period, or if the contract goes beyond 12 months, $1 million. If the law doesn't apply to terms that set the price payable, but again, more detail can be provided for anyone who has an interest. We'll be releasing guidance on our early assessments of unfair contract terms in business contracts later this year, and hopefully it'll be of interest to you. Unconscionable conduct, I'll move quickly because time's running. Might just go to the Coles matter and note the Woolworths matter that we have on foot. This is a significant, in our view, matter taken on behalf of a whole number of small businesses who just weren't in a very strong bargaining position at all to raise concerns with the supermarkets themselves or with the regulator. Interestingly, in this matter, one of the early challenges for the ACCC was generating any data, any complaint data, to encourage businesses affected by this conduct to have the confidence to raise their concerns without fear of losing their supply relationship and losing their business as a result. So we did work hard at that, and we managed to have 50 or so complaints come to us, and it showed a pattern of conduct. And I'll focus on Coles initially, particularly because the case is settled, where Coles had crossed a line. Basically, the gist was Coles, on the facts, engaged in serious, deliberate and repeated conduct to exploit the small businesses that supplied it, and included conduct such as requiring the business suppliers to meet the costs that Coles incurred in the event that someone stole goods out of the supermarket, notwithstanding that the supplier had no control over the security of the buildings or the behaviour of the shoppers or the staff within the stores. That's a small example. Another example that jumps to mind was where a particular delivery was, I think it was half an hour late, or it might have been 2 hours late, and there was an unexpected bill of $20,000 for the supplier on the basis that was a penalty for late delivery. That penalty clause there was no provision in the supply agreement for that penalty to be imposed. It was simply imposed arbitrarily and at no notice. So there are a couple of the examples, there are a multitude of examples, and Coles paid the penalty of a $10 million set of fines and a $12 million compensation to the suppliers identified. It really has set, we think, a bit of a bar for what big business should be thinking about in its relationship with small business. Similarly, we have instituted proceedings in the federal court against Woolworths and alleging unconscionable conduct in dealing with a large number of supermarket suppliers there also. And the allegation that we have is that Woolworths was looking to prop up its bottom line. It was having a bad half year, and therefore it went out to a number of suppliers seeking a contribution to help it close the gap between its bottom line and where it wanted to be. And on the face of it, we can't see any reasonable basis for that, the approaches that were made and the way they were made. So that's yet to be tested, so I should be stopped there. So look, I'm conscious again of time. I touch on the Food and Grocery Code only that it really has, I think, potentially a big impact for a number of people here today. The Food and Grocery Code provisions reflect the issues that we identified in the Coles matter and in other complaints we've had about supermarkets' conduct. And the intent of that code is to provide some confidence for growers in their dealings, suppliers in their dealings with supermarkets, that there are a number of lines of behaviour, very specific lines of behaviour, that are really brought to the attention of the supermarkets that are not acceptable. And we will be policing the Food and Grocery Code in the same way we police other codes where we have the right tools. In this code we have the ability to effectively audit the supermarkets, and we will be using that authority. It avoids the need for those who fear having their supply arrangements stopped having to be identified in an investigation by the ACCC. It allows us to find what the behaviour on the paperwork that is maintained by the supermarkets, and we're looking forward to seeing what that auditing reveals. Finally, I'll just touch on collective bargaining. Small business, including farmers, horticulturalists and a range of others in the agricultural sector, can and have gotten some benefits from bargaining collectively with their suppliers or customers as a group. Working together, you can sometimes negotiate better terms and conditions with larger businesses and create efficiencies. We can allow collective bargaining arrangements where we consider the public benefit outweighs the public detriment. And for example, last year, the Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association was authorised to collectively negotiate on behalf of its vegetable growers in the terms and conditions of growing contracts with McCain's and Simplot and any other future vegetable processor in Tasmania. Provides just a bit more confidence in securing a fair outcome in the contracting. Look, I've probably overused my time. Just a bit of a gallop through some of the issues that we've been focusing on that we think are relevant. Very happy to take, I'll stick around until after lunch, so very happy to have discussions and take questions out of session. Thank you.